Caleb Montero seemed to have it all. At 42, he was the beloved principal of Maplewood High, a respected leader in the quiet town of Willow Creek. Known for his ability to turn struggling schools into thriving academic environments, Caleb was a hands-on principal who made it his mission to mentor and support his students. He had been married to his college sweetheart, Miranda, for nearly 2 decades, and together they had 2 teenage children, Ethan and Zoe. While the Montero family appeared perfect to those on the outside, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Caleb and Miranda's marriage, though built on years of loyalty and trust, had grown distant over time. Miranda, once a teacher herself, had put her career on hold to care for their children and support Caleb's professional ambitions. And somewhere along the way, they had drifted apart. Though Caleb was seen as a pillar of the community, some had started to notice his increasing detachment. There were whispered rumors of his late nights at the school and a change in his normally cheerful demeanor. While those close to him assumed it was the strain of his demanding job, there was more to Caleb's situation than met the eye. At the center of his hidden struggles was Lila Emerson, a 17-year-old senior at Maplewood High. Lila was a bright student, a straight-A achiever with dreams of attending an Ivy League college. Her teachers praised her dedication, and she was seen as a role model among her peers. But, like Caleb, Lila carried private burdens. Her parents were frequently absent, leaving her to navigate her final year of high school largely on her own. When she met Caleb during a school mentoring program, she found someone who seemed to understand her feelings of isolation. At first, Caleb simply offered guidance, seeing her potential and offering advice on college applications. But as time went on, their relationship began to blur the boundaries between mentorship and something far more intimate. The two began to meet privately after school hours. Initially, their conversations were innocent, revolving around her school projects and future aspirations. But as Lila started to confide in Caleb about her loneliness, and as Caleb found himself connecting with her on an emotional level he hadn't felt in years, a dangerous attraction grew between them. Neither could pinpoint the exact moment the relationship crossed a line, but the intensity of their connection escalated quickly, turning into something neither was prepared for. For Caleb, Lila filled a void he had long felt in his marriage. For Lila, he became a beacon of support she desperately craved. They were each other's secret escape from their unfulfilled lives, even if they both knew that what they were doing was wrong. Though they kept their relationship hidden, some students and faculty began to notice the time they spent together, the lingering glances, the private meetings. And while rumors began to circulate, the closeness remained under the radar until Caleb's murder. It was late on a chilly autumn evening when Nina Ruiz, the head janitor of Maplewood High, made her final rounds through the empty school halls. She was used to working late, and with the year nearing its end, the school felt quieter than ever. Only the hum of the hallway lights and the occasional creak of the building kept her company. As she made her way toward the administrative wing, she noticed Caleb Montero's office door slightly ajar. It struck her as odd. Caleb was typically meticulous about locking his door. Curious and a bit concerned, Nina approached the doorway. When she stepped in, she froze in shock. Caleb's body was slumped against his desk, his shirt stained with deep red, his eyes open and empty. Papers were scattered across the floor, and the room looked as though a desperate struggle had taken place. Blood streaked the wall behind his desk, and a letter opener lay discarded nearby, glinting under the dim light. The violence of the scene was overwhelming, and Nina stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth as she fought back tears. Nina immediately called 911. Her hands trembling as she struggled to convey what she had seen. As the dispatcher spoke, her voice was almost a distant echo in Nina's mind, drowned out by the surreal horror of the situation. Within minutes, the police arrived, and Detective Aaron Watts quickly took charge of the scene. Known for his calm, steady demeanor, Detective Watts was a seasoned investigator, well-respected in Willow Creek for his thoroughness. But even he was taken aback by the brutality of the scene. As Watts carefully examined Caleb's office, his mind raced with questions. Who could have wanted Caleb dead, and why so violently? He noted the signs of a struggle: the overturned chair, scattered papers, and blood spatters across the walls. It was clear that Caleb hadn't gone down without a fight, suggesting his killer might have been someone close, someone he didn't initially perceive as a threat. Outside the building, a small crowd began to gather as news spread that the beloved principal had been found dead. Among the crowd was Lila Emerson. She stood back, her face pale and her hands clutched tightly around her phone. She had been texting Caleb that evening, hoping to meet with him for another private talk, but she hadn't received a reply. When she heard the commotion, she'd come to the school, her heart pounding with a mixture of worry and fear. The sight of the police cars and the realization that Caleb was dead shattered her. Tears blurred her vision, but she kept her distance, knowing that her presence might raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. Detective Watts, after gathering preliminary details from Nina, turned his attention to the growing crowd, observing their reactions. The teachers and students who had arrived wore expressions of shock and grief, struggling to comprehend the reality of what had happened. But when his gaze fell upon Lila, he noted something different in her demeanor, a visible tension, a hint of fear that seemed deeper than mere grief. As Lila left, Watts made a mental note to look into her connection with Caleb. For now, however, he focused on securing the crime scene, ordering forensics to analyze the scattered papers, the blood patterns, and the letter opener, which seemed the most likely murder weapon. Meanwhile, the town was reeling. News of Caleb's murder spread quickly, and with it, rumors of his secret affair with a student. While few people knew of Lila's relationship with Caleb, those who did, her close friends, certain staff members, and even Caleb's wife, Miranda, found themselves under suspicion as each grappled with the guilt, secrets, and betrayals that had stayed hidden until that night. The tragedy sent shockwaves through Willow Creek, shattering the community's trust and raising painful questions. Who could have taken Caleb's life so violently? What secrets had he kept, and who else might be involved? As Detective Watts began his investigation, the quiet town found itself bracing for the truth, knowing that once uncovered, it would change everything. The morning after Caleb's body was discovered, Detective Aaron Watts convened a team of investigators in his office to discuss the initial findings. The crime scene had left more questions than answers, and Watts knew this case would be anything but simple. He divided his team into groups. One focused on analyzing the physical evidence, another on interviewing staff and students, and a third on investigating Caleb's personal life. They needed every lead they could get. The forensic team, led by Dr. Lena Cross, had spent hours examining Caleb's office. They confirmed that the letter opener found beside him was the murder weapon, bearing traces of both Caleb's and an unidentified person's DNA. Dr. Cross noted that the wound pattern suggested a personal attack, indicating rage rather than a simple crime of opportunity. Whoever did this wanted to hurt him, she told Watts during the team briefing. This wasn't just about killing him. It was deeply personal. The investigation quickly shifted to Caleb's relationships within and outside the school. Watts interviewed Miranda Montero, Caleb's wife, who had been informed of his death only hours before. She was still in shock, her grief raw and palpable. As Watts gently questioned her, Miranda's confusion turned to an almost palpable frustration. She confessed that their marriage had been troubled and distant for some time, but she couldn't fathom who would have taken Caleb's life. Despite her own emotional distance from Caleb in recent years, she insisted that he was a good man and beloved by many. But Watts' instincts told him there was more to the story. Miranda had known about the rumors of Caleb's alleged affair, and the pain in her eyes as she spoke hinted that, at the very least, she suspected they were true. Watts made a note to delve deeper into Caleb's relationship history and to follow up on those whispers circulating through the town. Watts then turned his focus toward the students, particularly Lila Emerson. Lila had been one of the few students at the school the night Caleb was killed, though she had left shortly after the police arrived. When he called her in for questioning, Lila appeared tense, her gaze darting around the room, her hands fidgeting nervously. What started with gentle questions, asking about her classes, her thoughts on Caleb as a principal, and what she knew of his life outside school. At first, Lila's answers were short and formal, revealing little beyond the usual respect she'd had for Caleb as an authority figure. But Watts noticed that she grew visibly uncomfortable whenever he mentioned Caleb's personal life. Sensing there was more to uncover, Watts pressed gently, asking if she had been in contact with Caleb outside of school hours. Her face paled, and she hesitated before muttering that they'd occasionally discussed her college applications. As the questioning continued, Watts felt certain that Lila was hiding something. He asked directly if she had been in Caleb's office the night he died. Lila's composure broke. She avoided his gaze, stammering out a half-hearted denial before quickly retracting it, saying she'd only stopped by briefly to drop off paperwork. Her evasiveness and the way her voice wavered told Watts there was more to the story, but she refused to elaborate. After Lila left, Watts contacted Caleb's colleagues, hoping to gather more insight. One of them, Derek Flint, a history teacher and close friend of Caleb's, hinted that he had seen Caleb and Lila spending time together after hours. "I didn't think much of it back then," Derek admitted, his face filled with regret. "But there were times I thought their relationship seemed unusual. They were just too close." The revelation weighed heavily on Watts. He reviewed the statements and noticed a pattern emerging. Lila wasn't the only person aware of the rumored relationship. Staff members, students, even some of Caleb's neighbors had whispered suspicions. The problem was everyone seemed equally unsure if it was mere gossip or grounded in reality. Back at the crime lab, Dr. Cross made a breakthrough in analyzing Caleb's phone, discovering a string of late-night messages between him and Lila. The texts revealed a relationship that had indeed crossed boundaries, confirming the affair that had only been rumored until now. But Dr. Cross also found another, far more disturbing thread. A series of threats from an unknown number warning Caleb to end it or pay the price. Watts' mind raced as he reviewed the texts. This wasn't just about a secret affair. Someone else had been watching, someone with knowledge of Caleb and Lila's relationship and a desire to see it end, no matter the cost. With this revelation, the investigation took on a new urgency, as Watts and his team began piecing together the threads of betrayal, secrets, and revenge that had woven their way through Caleb Montero's life. As Detective Aaron Watts reviewed the mounting evidence, a list of suspects began to take shape, each with their own potential motives and tangled connections to Caleb Montero's life. At the top of the list were Miranda Montero, Caleb's estranged wife, Derek Flint, his close friend and colleague, and of course, Lila Emerson, whose relationship with Caleb had only recently come to light. Each of them had reasons to hide the truth, but Watts was determined to unravel their secrets. Miranda was the first person Watts called back for questioning. She appeared visibly drained, her grief now layered with the pressure of being under suspicion. As Watts probed deeper into her relationship with Caleb, Miranda admitted that she had known about his affair long before his death. The confession came with a bitter edge. She explained how Caleb's betrayal had crushed her, but she swore she had no part in his death. "I wanted out of the marriage," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If anything, I was relieved he was distracted by someone else. I just wanted a clean break." Watts studied her closely, noting the mixture of pain and resolve in her words. Her alibi for the night of Caleb's death was weak. She claimed she had been home alone, drinking and trying to numb the ache that came with knowing her husband had chosen someone else. Still, she insisted she lacked the anger or desperation to kill him, though Watts sensed a simmering resentment that made him hesitant to rule her out. Next, Watts turned his attention to Derek Flint. The history teacher had been a loyal friend to Caleb, or so it seemed, but several colleagues hinted that Derek may have known more about Caleb's private life than he let on. When confronted, Derek admitted that he had been aware of the affair between Caleb and Lila, and that he had warned Caleb multiple times to end it. "I told him he was risking everything: the school, his marriage, his reputation. He wouldn't listen," Derek said, his tone laced with frustration. Derek also revealed that he'd once caught a glimpse of the messages on Caleb's phone from an unknown sender. "The texts were chilling," he said, his face pale. "They threatened to ruin him if he didn't end things with Lila." Derek claimed that he didn't know who had sent the messages, but his concern for Caleb's well-being and reputation had strained their friendship in recent months. Watts couldn't help but wonder if that frustration had grown into something darker. Although Derek's alibi was stronger, he'd been seen at a local bar with friends during the estimated time of Caleb's death. Watts couldn't fully eliminate him as a suspect. Finally, Watts brought Lila Emerson in for another round of questioning. Her demeanor was more guarded than before, her eyes avoiding his as she answered his questions with short, tense replies. When asked about the threatening messages, Lila's face turned pale, and she admitted that she, too, had received similar texts urging her to stay away from Caleb. She hadn't thought much of them at first, chalking it up to jealous classmates or a concerned parent, but now she was terrified, fearing that her involvement with Caleb might have put her in danger. Watts pressed her further, trying to uncover any clue that might reveal who had been sending the threats. Though she seemed genuinely scared, Lila's reluctance to fully disclose details about her relationship with Caleb left Watts frustrated. She was holding something back, and he couldn't ignore the fact that her presence at the school that night remained unexplained. With each suspect, Watts found himself entangled in a web of fractured relationships and unresolved emotions. Miranda, haunted by betrayal and resentment. Derek, torn between loyalty and anger. And Lila, caught in a dangerous affair and clearly hiding crucial information. The motives were all there: jealousy, betrayal, rage, but none of them fit neatly into the picture Watts was trying to piece together. The threats were the one consistent link, the shadow of an unseen figure pulling the strings. Whoever had sent them seemed determined to bring Caleb down, no matter the cost. Watts was left with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. The path to solving Caleb's murder lay somewhere in the tangled lives of those closest to him. Detective Aaron, Watts was running out of patience and time. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill, tangled in conflicting stories and lingering secrets. However, a breakthrough arrived unexpectedly when the forensics lab reported back with fresh evidence. The lab had identified partial fingerprints on the letter opener found at the scene. Prints that didn't match Caleb, Miranda, or Lila. They were a partial match to Derek Flint. Watts called Derek in immediately for questioning, determined to get answers. Derek, visibly shaken, claimed he had no idea how his fingerprints ended up on the weapon. He explained that he had been in Caleb's office earlier that day to discuss a school event, and he might have touched the letter opener inadvertently. But Watts wasn't convinced. Derek's anxiety was palpable, and his once confident demeanor had been replaced by nervous glances and shaky hands. When Watts presented Derek with the threatening text found on Caleb's phone, Derek's face went pale. He admitted that he had known about the affair, that he'd even warned Caleb to end it, but he swore he would never have taken his life over it. "I told him he was making a mistake, that he was throwing everything away," Derek said, his voice unsteady. "But I didn't kill him. I thought the texts were from a stranger, not someone close." Still, the evidence weighed against Derek, and Watts felt a shift in the investigation's momentum. He decided to search Derek's belongings to see if they could find anything else linking him to the crime. What Watts discovered was startling. In Derek's car, hidden beneath a pile of papers, was a burner phone. Watts knew it could be the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. With the device in hand, Watts took it to the lab, hoping to recover any information that might connect Derek to the threatening messages. Within hours, the forensics team confirmed his suspicions. The phone matched the number that had sent the threatening texts to both Caleb and Lila. But the revelations didn't stop there. The messages detailed personal grievances, expressed in language that went beyond a mere warning. The texts were venomous, suggesting not only anger, but a deep sense of betrayal. Derek was confronted with the evidence, and his carefully constructed story began to crumble. Under pressure, he finally confessed to sending the messages, but he maintained that they were empty threats, written in moments of frustration. "Caleb was reckless, and I knew it would blow up sooner or later," Derek admitted. "But I swear I never wanted him dead." The pressure mounted as Watts pressed him on his whereabouts that night. Although Derek had initially claimed he'd been at a bar with friends, further investigation revealed that he'd left the bar for a significant period, unaccounted for by any witness. Confronted with this gap in his alibi, Derek became increasingly defensive. Then, another twist. As the team analyzed Derek's digital footprint, they uncovered an email exchange between him and Miranda. The emails, dating back several months, revealed a shared frustration toward Caleb. Miranda had confided in Derek about her marital troubles and her resentment toward Caleb's behavior. Though the emails stopped short of anything incriminating, the tone was unmistakable, a bond of shared anger and perhaps collusion. When Watts brought Miranda back in for questioning, she denied any conspiracy with Derek. But she admitted to venting her frustration about Caleb to him, finding a sympathetic ear in someone who had also been hurt by Caleb's choices. "It was never supposed to go beyond words," she whispered. "I never thought he'd actually do anything." With mounting evidence and a shaken confession from Derek, Watts had the lead he needed. Derek had felt betrayed by his friend, humiliated by Caleb's disregard for the values he believed the school should uphold. In a moment of rage, he had taken matters into his own hands, crossing a line that couldn't be undone. The breakthrough brought clarity to the tangled web, revealing Derek as the one who'd set the events in motion, driven by anger and a sense of betrayal. Now, with both his confession and the physical evidence, Watts was ready to proceed with an arrest, finally closing in on justice for Caleb Montero. With mounting evidence and a fractured confession from Derek Flint, Detective Aaron Watts moved quickly to secure an arrest warrant. The case had gained significant attention in the local media, and news of Caleb Montero's tragic death had left the community reeling. When Derek was taken into custody, whispers of betrayal and disbelief filled the town. Caleb had been a respected principal, a familiar face at every school event. Now, the revelation of Derek's involvement in his murder sent shockwaves through the community. As the trial date approached, Derek's defense attorney, Riley Morton, constructed a case built on emotional strain and circumstantial evidence. Morton argued that Derek's anger was directed toward Caleb's reckless behavior, but not enough to justify murder. "My client may have sent messages out of frustration," Morton claimed, "but words, however heated, are not evidence of intent to kill." However, the prosecution, led by ADA Naomi Fraser, presented a compelling case. Fraser was meticulous, describing how Derek's deep-seated resentment had festered over time, ultimately boiling over into an act of violence. She used the threatening texts as a foundation, painting a picture of Derek's descent from a concerned friend to an obsessed vigilante who took justice into his own hands. Fraser outlined the hidden burner phone, the damning fingerprint evidence on the letter opener, and Derek's unaccounted-for time on the night of the murder. In the courtroom, Miranda Montero's testimony added another layer of complexity. She admitted her emotional affair with Derek, confessing that she had confided in him about her resentment toward Caleb's actions. Miranda's revelation shed light on how Derek had felt not only personally betrayed by Caleb's actions, but also a strange sense of duty toward Miranda, whom he saw as a victim of Caleb's choices. Miranda, visibly distressed, assured the court that she'd never imagined her words would fuel anything beyond conversation. Yet her interactions with Derek became a critical part of the prosecution's case, portraying Derek's motive as driven by jealousy, bitterness, and an urge to rescue Miranda from her unfaithful husband. When it was time for Derek to take the stand, he maintained his innocence regarding the murder itself. "Yes, I sent those messages, and yes, I was angry," Derek admitted. "But I never killed him. I just wanted him to understand the damage he was doing." His voice shook as he spoke, and though his words conveyed remorse, they did little to convince the jury of his innocence. The prosecution painted Derek as a man whose obsession had become deadly, pushed over the edge by Caleb's betrayal and disregard. The trial lasted several weeks, during which Lila Emerson was also called to testify. Lila's presence in the courtroom was haunting. Her youthful face, marked by the trauma of the affair's consequences, reminded everyone of Caleb's choices and the ripple effect they had created. She tearfully recounted her relationship with Caleb, her voice breaking as she explained how she'd feared the texts but had never considered they could be from someone close to him. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. Derek's actions, while not premeditated with precision, were determined to have been driven by overwhelming jealousy and rage, culminating in Caleb's death. The sentence was handed down swiftly, 20 years to life. As Derek was led out of the courtroom, a tense silence filled the room, broken only by the quiet sobs of Caleb's family and Miranda's vacant stare. The community, though deeply shaken, began to process the loss of their principal and the scandal that had engulfed their town. Caleb's family mourned the complex truth behind his death, struggling to reconcile the man they loved with the secrets he had harbored. Miranda moved away shortly after, unable to bear the weight of staying in the place where her life had been shattered. Lila returned to school, though her innocence was forever tainted by the events that had unfolded. In the end, Detective Watts felt a bittersweet sense of closure. He had solved the case, but he knew the wounds it left would take years to heal. The tale of Caleb Montero's fall and Derek Flint's obsession served as a cautionary reminder of how quickly hidden resentments and jealousy could turn deadly, forever altering the lives of everyone they touched. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the jury delivered its verdict. Derek Flint was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge's gavel struck, echoing in the hearts of all present, signaling the end of a trial that had exposed the darker sides of love, betrayal, and obsession. Derek's expression shifted from defiance to despair as he realized the weight of his actions and their irreversible consequences. Caleb Montero's family felt a mix of relief and lingering grief. They had lost a husband and father, and the verdict provided a semblance of closure. Yet the void he left behind was palpable. Miranda, once a devoted wife, now stood alone, grappling with the truth about her husband's double life. The community mourned Caleb's loss, grappling with the harsh reality that someone they respected could lead such a secret life. As the days turned into weeks, Detective Aaron Watts reflected on the case, aware that while justice had been served, the scars would take time to heal. Lila struggled to move on, haunted by the memories of her relationship with Caleb and the guilt of being a catalyst in the tragedy. Derek was sentenced to 20 years to life, a punishment that would strip him of his freedom while forcing him to confront the man he had become. The community slowly began to rebuild, though the impact of Caleb's affair and subsequent murder echoed in their hearts. The tragic tale served as a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the devastating consequences that can arise when love turns dark.